So today we're talking about job searching in an uncertain time. With the pandemic and everything else going on, it has thrown a lot of industries for a loop. I'll be touching a little bit on some of the numbers related to unemployment and where you can find the most up-to-date information, as well as some strategies to keep you going throughout this process. Because I can't the idea of doing this, managing the pandemic, searching for a job, being a student, it's a lot to manage all at the same time. So hopefully some of the things that we will talk about today can give you some strategies to manage that successfully. So I do want to do a little bit of an intro about how career services can help. So there is a myth that career services is only resumes and cover letters. And yes, we do that, but we can also help with a lot of other things. So I'm not sure if anybody's looking to continue their education. That's something also that we talk about: full-time, part-time internship opportunities, and even just reflections on where you are and where you're going in your career. If those are discussions you want to have, happy to have those with you. This is a list of things that I typically help students with in my role in career services. So it's everything from CVs to, managing your professional images or image networking, talking about academia versus industry and things like that. So again, more than just resumes and cover letters. And we do have two folks on the MCV campus who can help you. So there's me, Megan Hollis, and we also have Sonia Barnes. I'm going to be showing you a resource called Handshake a little bit later, and that is the resource that you'll use to make appointments with us, but also it's a job search engine. So looks like I got ahead of myself. This is what Handshake is, and I will show you how to access it a little bit later. But I do want to talk a little bit about the numbers. So I think there's a lot of information going around right now about what unemployment looks like in Virginia. And so let me just pop open this link so we can see this, and I'll share the slides after so you can have access to them. So the overall, I won't read this entire article, but the overall headline looks like the Virginia unemployment rate rose to almost 5% in December, while total non-farm payroll increased by 800. So if we look at that, so that's a very overarching general across all industry statement. So if we delve down a little bit deeper into education and health services, which is where y'all fall in. So this is what we were at in December 2020. Now, if you look back at December 2019, it looks like we're actually, the unemployment rate has dropped a little bit, which is nice. We never know where it's going to go just based on everything that's going on in the world. But even looking at this gave me a little bit of encouragement just to see what's going on specifically within that field. So it's different for other fields. You can see the percent change and things like that, but that can be helpful. And if you want, you can also take a look by state and by the US in general. And I'll be touching on some of the tips that they go over in this article, but I found it pretty helpful. And like I said, I'll share the slides after so you have access to all of these links. I wanted to go over a little bit of numbers also as far as what we see in Handshake. So as I said, Handshake is our job posting system. And this is, if you just pay attention to this category, you can see as of July 2020, this is where we were for full-time job postings. And you can see it's slowly been, ticking up a little bit, took a little dip in November, December, which is natural with hiring, but then it's picking right back up in January 2021. So if we scroll down a little bit longer, you can see that we obviously don't have the full data set for spring 2021 yet, but if we continue on the path that we're on now, then we'll be at or at least more or at least equal to what we saw in fall 2020. So to me, that's a little bit encouraging just to see. Again, this is across all industries, so I couldn't drill down to just healthcare, but people are hiring now, if that gives you any encouragement. I delved a little deeper into kind of what folks are thinking about the healthcare industry and found this article in Forbes. Again, I won't read it. I bolded the interesting parts. But overall, one of the industries that has been most impacted by the pandemic is healthcare, naturally. That's the one that's, dealing with the most of the effects of this. But it goes on to say that the most in-demand jobs are going to be the ones that are on the front lines. So it cites specifically some things like nurse practitioners, OT and PT assistants, and then some, behavioral mental health substance abuse counselors, but then also goes on to say that there may be a high demand for specialized fields. So I thought that was interesting. Again, there's no way to predict that specifically yet, but it's, a specialized field like a speech language pathologist is expected to see a pretty big increase this year. So that I think says to me, if you're thinking about specializing, that might be an area to explore, but it doesn't sound like it's super required yet. So I thought that was interesting. I think even before we get into some strategies, it's important in any job search, no matter what no matter what the economic climate, is to talk about control, the level of control you have in the job search. So I've listed essentially the things that you can control in the job search on the left here. You can control your application documents, your professional image. So that means how how you display yourself, how do you put yourself out there on social media, how do you um, the image that you print out, and then your references so that you can control who you ask for references and to a degree, what they say about you. That's three things. Three. The things you can't control is literally everything else. So you don't know who's in the application pool, you don't know the timeline, you don't know when the reviews, you don't know what mood people are in when they do reviews, you don't know what interview questions you're going to ask or anything like that. So even without the pandemic happening, even without a lot of things that are going on in the world, there is very little you can control in the job search. So we're going to talk about the things that you can control and how you can maximize that. So don't lose it. I hope I haven't lost you yet. Um, Overall, when you start the job search, you want to start with thinking about what you want. And so that happens by reflection, by sitting down and saying, okay, what am I good at? What do I value? And what are my interests? So combining those three areas, your values, your interests, and skills, will help you make an informed career decision. So if you think about those, thinking about what you want out of a job, what you want of your life out of your life outside of a job, you can track to see what areas you are focusing on, what areas you need in a job, or versus what things that you may want to explore outside of a job. We put so much emphasis, and it makes sense because this is the area that you are in life right now, so much emphasis on what that job is going to be. And in the US, a lot of times our job seems so essential to our identity, but it's important to remember that you will have a life outside of your job. So think about what you want out of work versus what you want out of life outside of work too. So sitting down and actually doing some reflection about that can be very helpful. And then once you know about yourself, you can kind of move on to know about your options. And so how do you learn about your options? You learn about your options by talking to people through informational interviews, and I'll talk a little bit more about those later. You can use resources like Handshake to see what jobs are out there, what opportunities are being posted specifically for students. You can use online resources like the ones I mentioned earlier. So looking at employment rates or unemployment rates. There are organizations like the Bureau of Labor Statistics that post that information. You can follow the news articles for specific companies that you're interested in. Seeing what they're doing right now during a pandemic can be very telling. Are they keeping leadership and letting go a lot of the frontline people, or the opposite? Or are they doing other things to kind of combat what's going on? But their reactions can be very telling as to how they treat their employees. And then a lot of times where I find people struggle with the job search is where they find that they just sit behind a computer and apply to opportunities, and they forget to reach out to the people in their network. So absolutely don't forget to reach out to the people that you know. Use your people resources to help inform your job search and maybe to pass opportunities your way. So I did want to show you Handshake briefly. The way you access Handshake is you go to careers.vcu.edu and you click this link right here. So I think it's going to take me directly to my account, but if you click on it, it'll prompt you to log in with your VCU ID and password. So this is what you'll see when you'll log in. I'm already logged in, which is why I got to skip that step. But right over here is a jobs tab. So you can see there's over 10,000 jobs that are posted. Highly recommend using the filters because otherwise you gotta scroll through everything, and that's just not a good use of anybody's time. So you can search by just full-time, by just paid roles. You can search even, by what the type of role is. You can just go by industry if that's what you'd like. I notice we have a lot of pharmacy folks, so I'm gonna type in, I think I did a, let's go pharmacist and see where that gets us. So 28 opportunities right there, and they're all over the country. So Handshake, our opportunities posted in Handshake are from employers who are hiring specifically for students at university colleges and universities. So they have created, employers have created an account with Handshake to post opportunities to specific schools. So for example, Northeast Army Healthcare Recruiting logged onto Handshake and posted it specifically for VCU. They may have posted to other schools too, but they clicked the VCU button. So that can be telling because the amount of opportunities here can be mostly entry-level positions, which is helpful to see kind of what industries are hiring for those areas. Okay, so Handshake is particularly helpful there. Other places to find jobs. So, once you're familiar with your options, you can move on to finding opportunities. So I just talked about Handshake. I was thinking we were going to have a healthcare focus, so I found this site to do, which is kind of a list of just general healthcare job search sites. So these may be interesting to you. You can see it's everything from hospital careers to, nursing to, I think there's a respiratory care field, things like that. So find the specialized sites, and that might be through professional associations in your field. Are you a member of a student chapter of, the Student Pharmacists Association, or does it go up to, it was ASCP, the American Society for Clinical Pharmacists, or things like that? There's a professional association for everything. So find a professional association, and a lot of times they will post opportunities that you don't have to be a member to access, which can be particularly helpful. And then again, don't forget the people aspect. Though I skipped this one. I have heard of a lot of students having success with using recruiters or recruiting agencies. One thing that I do want you to know, if you decide to go that path, it's not a service that you should be paying for. So if somebody asks you for money to recruit for an opportunity, please back away quickly. It's up to you if that's what you'd like to do. The way I have heard students using those resources is if they have a LinkedIn profile and maybe a recruiter contacted them through LinkedIn. That's how I have heard of those connections being made. But we also work with organizations like Kelly Services that is a recruiting firm, and they have different branches, different specialized branches. So there's a STEM area and a healthcare area, that I believe. So you can use those resources as well if you want to take kind of a multi-pronged approach to your job search. One thing that I think is really helpful in the job search, because you have to do it while you're a student, is to set goals. So if you're not familiar with SMART goals, SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So it's better than just setting a goal like, I'm going to apply for jobs tomorrow. It doesn't tell me what or how or when or how many. So if you're putting together a goal, I think it's a good idea to try and make it a SMART goal. And here's some of the steps that I've outlined to help you with that. Number one, if you don't do anything else, write down your goal, make it real, put it in some sort of written format or typed format. To me, things are more real if I actually write them down versus typing them. But you can think about, why is that goal important to you? What's the benefits of achieving the goal? Any obstacles that you might overcome? Making it detailed and specific. So I'm going to apply for 5 jobs tomorrow rather than just jobs tomorrow. You're going to go into detail about the steps you'll take to achieve that goal, and then make it measurable. So what will you choose to track your progress? And then making it achievable, if you want to delve into that a little bit deeper, you might think about why you need to achieve it. How will you find time to pursue that goal? Anything that you need to learn, or people who can support you in achieving that goal. Make it relevant. So why do you want to achieve that goal? If you have a personal investment, a lot of times that you'll find that you achieve your goals a little bit quicker than if it's a goal that's been assigned to you. And then make it time bound. So what's your deadline for achieving that goal? Because sometimes you find that you are motivated by deadlines rather than anything else. So there's your quick lesson in SMART goals. If you're not a SMART goals person, you might try fuzzy goals. I don't know that those are super helpful for the job search, because they tend to be flexible and short term. And a lot of times when students are looking for jobs, they tend to have a very solid deadline of graduation when they need to find an opportunity. But if you're not a SMART goals person, then fuzzy goals might work for you. You might just say, okay, this week I'm going to focus on getting information about this, or reaching out to certain people here. And so they can be a little less intimidating than SMART goals. One thing to remember in the job search is to not forget the basics. So it may seem overwhelming to think about, everything that you have to deal with right now as a student, everything that's going on in the world. But if you don't have these basics down, then you'll find that you'll be fighting essentially an uphill battle. So I've linked to a couple different things that I find helpful in terms of our resume guides. So I linked our healthcare resume guides here. So you have that as a resource. There's some healthcare specific resume advice, but I really like looking at the templates. And so those are the ones I find helpful. So if you take a look at the headings and how things are organized, I think that's particularly helpful. There's a couple different examples just based on functional area, but I always like to look at the headings to see how people organize things. I find that that's the most helpful out of any of these. And then each resume that you submit, or if you're using a CV, it should absolutely be tailored to each job. And so one thing that I found helpful is this article about tailoring to jobs, just because when I say tailoring it to a job, sometimes people don't know what I mean, which makes sense. And so this goes over in depth what it means to actually tailor a resume to a job. But what the basics of that is essentially taking the job description. And if you're somebody who likes to print things out, then print it out and put it right next to your CV or your cover letter and highlight the areas that seem important on the job description. So if they've mentioned that they want somebody who's a great communicator, highlight communication. Then look at your CV or your resume and highlight wherever you see communication. If you don't see communication on there, then we need to tailor. We need to reframe some of the bullet points that you might use for descriptions, some of the headings that you might have on your experiences, but making sure that whatever skills you have match with what they're looking for. That's tailoring your resume or your cover letter. And then I've also linked here our cover letter guide, and then a little bit of information about interviewing. So you have that available to you as well. One of the previous sessions that we did in this series was remote interviewing. So I've linked a little bit later to that recording so you have access to it. But the cover letter guide I think is wonderful. The interviewing guide goes over not only how to prepare, oh shoot, I linked the wrong thing, sorry. I'll fix that. Not only how to prepare, but questions that you can anticipate and also suggested questions to ask. So one of the biggest red flags that I see when I interview people is people not asking questions. So you always want to have questions prepared because it shows that you're interested in that organization. And then negotiation. So a lot of people are scared by the negotiation word, but it's something that you do every day. It's just having a conversation. And so making sure that you're feeling up to negotiating is definitely something that's good to prepare for in the job search as well. If you've got questions, I'm happy to meet with you and talk about any of those things. Okay, nope, so you got ahead of myself there. So this is where you can find the recording from the last Success Seminar series workshops that we did about remote interviewing. Things that you can be doing now to make sure that you are getting ready accurately and preparing for this job search. Everything from networking and informational interviewing, things that you can do to build your skill set, and then staying involved and staying positive. I'll go over each of these examples. So networking and informational interviews. Networking is another word that a lot of people don't like because it means you have to talk to people you don't know. But really, again, at the very least, at the bottom line is just having a conversation. And so there's lots of ways that you can network in less stressful environments. And one of the things that the pandemic has done for us is moved a lot of us online. And so platforms like LinkedIn, like virtual conferences, like VCU Link have become a lot more, there's a lot more traffic on there, and people are communicating a lot more online versus maybe they would have liked to communicate via phone call or in person before. So I highly recommend using these platforms. I think they're wonderful resources in the job search. I do want to go over one thing that I find valuable on LinkedIn. So if you're not, this is my LinkedIn account, but the thing that I like the most about LinkedIn is the groups. So if you come over here and click on work in your LinkedIn profile and then click on groups, you can see the groups that you're a member of, but then if you come over here and click on requested and then discover, it'll populate groups based on what's on your profile. So step one, fill out your profile. Step two, look at the groups that might be of interest to you. There are groups for everything. So let's come up here and we'll type in pharmacy and then we'll look in groups. And so when I'm looking at new groups that I want to join, I take a look at how many members are there, what the focus of the group is, if it's open or closed. Some professional associations will have LinkedIn groups that they limit only to their members, but a lot of times groups are open on LinkedIn. And so you can find, hey, pharmacy jobs, maybe you're interested in being an entrepreneur or joining the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy Association. But you can see how many people are in those groups. And so the ones that have a lot of members obviously tend to be more active. That doesn't mean the ones that have less members aren't great, but you'll have more opportunities obviously through the ones that are a little bit more active. So I highly recommend, if you just filled out your profile, take that next step and look at LinkedIn groups. And then professional associations, I mentioned them a couple times, but these are wonderful resources to connect with people who are active in the field. A lot of times they have student pricing for memberships as well, so you can join a relatively cheap, which can be helpful too. This link right here is to a professional association finder. And so a lot of times you will be familiar with the professional associations that are offered through your program or that have student chapters, but who's to say there isn't another one that's maybe better for you. So you can search based on keyword to see what professional associations may be out there that you haven't heard of yet. And then VCU Link is like LinkedIn for VCU. It's something that it's a platform that the Alumni Association runs, but it is basically a database of friends and alum of VCU who have volunteered to have their information available in case you have questions about what it's like to do what they do. So you can create an account and link it to either your LinkedIn profile, or you can log in with your VCU ID and password. And then I come over here to explore the community. And then you can search people by location, by major, by industry expertise. So I know it's growing every day. You might even look up and see, who's online with this area. 49 folks are listed in pharmaceuticals. And so you can look and see everybody has filled out a profile. And so you can message people directly or connect with people directly through VCU Link and then see kind of what their background is. So I always find that interesting. I think it's a wonderful resource. So you're networking with these people. You find somebody maybe that you want to reach out to on VCU Link or LinkedIn. But then what's the next step? The next step is to do what's called an informational interview. And that's where you interview them to ask them about their career path, what it's like to work in that industry or work for that organization, and basically have a chance to talk with that person and deepen the connection. So we have a really great resource on our website for informational interviews that goes over, what it is, how to find people, how to set it up, questions to ask that are helpful. And then maybe following up as well. So informational interviews are a great way to make new connections with people in your field. And, if you find that you connect really well with someone, they may end up sending you opportunities that they hear of as well. So it can be helpful. Other ways to build your skill set and make sure you stay involved. So doing informational interviews is great, but how do you stay active in your field? These are just a couple things that I thought of, but take a look at what's going on in your program. Take a look at what's going on in your professional associations, your student organizations, and see what opportunities they are putting forward as well. One thing that can be helpful also is to find opportunities to contribute. So that could be through volunteering or community service, but also through partnerships. And so we've got one with Parker Dewey, and they have a focus on micro internships. So let me see if this works. It should. But basically what it is, it's actual companies posting project opportunities for students. And so it's a micro internship because it's shorter and it's project based. And so you can apply for opportunities, you can search what opportunities are out there, but it's an opportunity to do some real work, and they're paid opportunities as well, which is nice. Okay, and then if you want to build your skill set, absolutely make sure that you're learning and growing, keeping up with what is going on in your field. LinkedIn Learning is something that's free for VCU students. It's a wonderful resource, so I absolutely recommend it. There are classes for everything. So that can be helpful too. And then lastly, just make sure that you keep a positive attitude. Even without the pandemic happening, job searching is a job, and it can be tricky to navigate, and it can be not always heartening if you're not hearing back. So make sure that you don't give up, that you keep applying and you keep going. Other things that are good to do is if you have gone maybe through, if you've applied and you haven't heard back, it's always a good idea to follow up. Usually I'd say I wait until after maybe a week after the position closes, or if you go through an interview process and you haven't heard anything, following up that way can be helpful as well. Things that are helpful to do, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but gathering intel. So if you're interested in working at a specific organization, start following them on LinkedIn, start following them on other social media, or look to see what they're in the news for lately. How are they treating their employees? And is that still an organization that you want to work for? So making sure you're paying attention to the organizations in your field can be helpful too. And then absolutely, like I mentioned, make sure you set goals to keep yourself motivated. If goals aren't your thing, how else can you stay motivated? Are you someone who journals at the end of every day? Are you someone who talks over things with your friends? And maybe using those as motivational techniques can be helpful too. And then staying as organized as you can in this process is really going to help. I am an Excel spreadsheets person, and so when I did my job search, I created an Excel spreadsheet of every job title, the organizations, the deadline, when I submitted it, when I needed to follow up, who I talked to, so everything was all in the same place. So that can be helpful. Find your organizational style and make sure it works for you, because if you're applying for a large number of opportunities, it can be tricky to remember, which one was which. And then staying positive throughout the search. Like I said, it can be tricky if you're not hearing back. It can't always be the most encouraging thing. So making sure you're in a good mental health space can be very helpful for this in order to keep you going. And so I've linked here the Well just because I love them as a resource. But they also have this really cool Google Doc with resources to boost your mental health. And so it's everything from videos, apps, websites, and articles, information about stress management and coping, and things like that. So if you're feeling like you're in a rough place, the Well is a wonderful resource. So I have talked to you for about half an hour now. I would love to take any questions. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I put my email address here if you want to follow up that way, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.